One of the things we help people with all the time on this channel and through our company is helping people to figure out a place to relocate around the world. And so we've done various different comparisons over the years of one city versus another, one country versus another. Today we're going to talk about two destinations that on paper seem to have a lot of similarities, but on the other hand have some keen differences. And when you kind of dive into it, there's a very different experience that people have of one country versus the other. And this is Panama and Thailand. So we're going to talk about Panama versus Thailand for people who are interested in relocating abroad to another country. In this case, probably a fairly warm country, and often one that's going to give them some tax savings, etc. So let's dive in and talk about those two today. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael from Offshore Citizen. We're some of the foremost international tax and relocation specialists in the world. We help you to figure out where to go, help you to get residencies, citizenships, build a global tax structure, set up things for international banking, etc. If any of those things are interesting to you and you would like help figuring out what the best solution is for you or implementing that solution, please send a message through offshorecitizen.net, or you can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below. Okay, so let's talk about Thailand and Panama. So both of these are, in certain respects, fairly tax-friendly countries. I've done some videos, I believe, on both of them. Certainly a bunch on Thailand over the years. It's been very popular. They are both places that are tropical, warm. I guess you would say, I don't know what you would call them, like third world, second world, sort of. Anyway, like there's sort of a low income portion of the population. It's not like considered to be an affluent nation, although there are affluent people who live in those places, etc. And over the years, I have had people move to all sorts of these different places. And Thailand and Panama have certainly been high on the list. We've worked with clients from 145 countries or territories, not necessarily all being countries, some being territories. And so we've observed people move to a lot of places. And one of the things that I have talked a little bit about that I think is super interesting is the idea of paying attention to where people stay as a form of a giant data aggregation and compression algorithm. What does that mean? Essentially, when somebody moves somewhere, so first of all, you'll move somewhere based on where something is, what it's like on paper, right? So you're like, oh, it seems good. But when you stay there, you actually bring the whole cohesive experience into your pores of what it's actually like to be in that country, right? And whether you decide to stay or not basically takes into account dozens and dozens of sort of tiny little variables that might not be visible on the surface. And I will tell you that my experience with clients, this is sort of biasing the thing up front, but anyway, is that people tend to stay in Thailand and they tend not to stay in Panama. I have had lots of people who've moved to Panama over the years, and almost nobody stayed, at least not long term. I don't know if I've had any client who's actually stayed in, or even somebody that I know through kind of what we do, who've stayed living there for 5 years. So that's something that's worth noting. But anyway, we're going to dive into the specifics. So first of all, about getting residency there. Panama used to have something called the Friendly Nations Visa Program. It was really easy for people from a host of different countries that were on this list to be able to set up and get residency there. They've modified it now, so you need to make an investment. And so that investment dissuades a lot of people. It used to be, 5, 10 grand or something, and now you have to do this few $100,000 investment. However, the reality is that people don't really realize that there are actually other paths to residency. There are quite a few. And so we can get you residency pretty easily in Panama if it's something that you're interested in doing. It'll cost you, whatever, 10 grand or something like that to kind of go through all the process of getting set up there. It's fairly easy to maintain, and so that is good. It's pretty accessible, not bad at all. Now, on the Thailand side, I've talked before that, for example, they have the Thai Elite Visa. Now, the price has gone up since I talked about it last, but the Thai Elite Visa is in some respects, the world's greatest visa. They actually want you to go there. If you do the full one, you get massages, you get special VIP treatment at the airport, you get all kinds of different stuff that comes with it. However, it does come with a cost. And so certainly in terms of the raw cost to get that particular visa is higher than it is to get residency in Panama. I'll bet you don't have an investment in this regard. Okay, so that's something to consider. There are, of course, other visas. There's something called the LTR. I've talked about this. Huge fan of the LTR in Thailand. If you can get it, I think it's the best visa to get in Thailand. However, a lot of people are excluded. There's some really weird conditions in terms of who can qualify and who can not. And so just because of the fact that it doesn't work for everybody, that kind of throws you off on other paths. Some other people will basically go and get some sort of a work visa. If you're in certain industries, particularly tech, that's often fairly viable. This puts you into their system a little bit deeper. Some people do volunteer visas. They've kind of cracked down on that. Educational visas, stuff like this. So I would say that if you're willing to spend the money, it's a very easy and straightforward process to get into Thailand, but it will be more expensive than going into Panama. Then we have taxes, okay? Panama famously has a territorial tax system, and people misunderstand how the territorial tax system works, but Panama, like Thailand, is in a situation where you don't really have deep enforcement, and so people get away with a lot of stuff and think that they're doing it okay just because they get away with it. In theory, the idea is that, okay, your foreign income is not taxed. The question is, what is the definition of foreign income? And usually, contrary to what people think, this is not based on where your clients are. It's based on some other factors, a big one being where the operations are. And so, technically speaking, a person should typically be paying taxes in Panama, at least to an extent, if they're living there. However, in reality, you can operate through foreign companies, you can operate through foreign bank accounts, things like this. And so, in practice, most people are going to pay very little tax there. If you have a Panamanian company, which would be a normal thing that people do when they're getting set up there, if you have foreign income, you do pay dividend withholding tax, but it's very small. So you end up with a pretty low overall tax rate. And so for most people, I would say in practical terms, they're going to pay low to no tax in Panama. Thailand, very similar. Thailand, although on a company level has worldwide tax, on a personal level has territorial tax. They have some nuances of this remittance system. I've mentioned in some previous videos they changed that recently. It used to be that if you had foreign income, typically from dividends and things like this, that were not remitted in the year that they were earned, then they weren't taxable. Now they've made it so that it's taxable no matter when you remit it. And so that's something, people are a little bit confused on this point because people think that money that they remit is taxable, but it's not money that you remit, it's income that you remit that's taxable. So worth delineating between those two. Anyway, the fact that in the case of Panama, you can remit it versus in the case of Thailand, you cannot without incurring tax, means probably that's one point for Panama. Slight edge in the overall analysis, but the reality is that both of them, you can plan around pretty effectively. And so for most people, their tax burden should be relatively low in some place like Thailand, because usually you can divert most of your income abroad. They have no CFC rules, they have no management control rules, they have no, like a bunch of these rules that normally get us into trouble in Western developed countries or high tax countries. Obviously not all Western. That's not a problem in Thailand. So pretty good. All right, what's next? In terms of the weather, I mean, they're both hot. So, you can kind of pick your poison, but I mean, typically quite hot. I would say that for whatever reason, people seem to prefer Thailand over Panama in this regard. I think part of the reason for that has something to do with kind of the accessibility of different conveniences, which we'll talk about in a second, and accessibility to kind of good sea destinations. So certainly, you have the Panama Canal, you're on the Caribbean, you have both coasts in the case of Panama. So you do have access to the sea, but it's sort of less known for having these great resorts, et cetera, than Thailand. Thailand is just extraordinarily well known. People go to the islands, they go down to Phuket, to Krabi, to places like this, all this sort of thing. Probably somebody's going to criticize me for saying it should be Phuket, not Phuket. Anyway, whatever. The whole point is that just in terms of that kind of thing, it's probably a little bit more favorable in my experience with people in Thailand. Now, the downside in Thailand is you have this burning season. And burning season, the air quality in Thailand is really poor. So that's not so great. Now, of course, you can go away, you can travel somewhere, et cetera, but burning season, not so great. I'm not aware of, it could be ignorant, so somebody correct me if I'm mistaken here, but I'm not aware of kind of a similar burning season thing that happens in Panama. And so that's a factor to consider. It also depends on the time of year, of course. I would say that in my experience, the climate in Panama during the right time of year, it's got some periods that are more mild than Thailand, and so that can be good. Also depends, of course, where you are in the country. If you go to higher altitudes, et cetera, then obviously it's a little bit cooler, et cetera. Safety-wise, Panama is a less safe place than Thailand, I would say, just in general. And so, is it like massively meaningful? It's going to make a big difference in your life. If you live in the right places, probably not, but it is a factor to consider. Time zones are a big thing for a lot of people. So one of the things that's appealing about Panama is you're on a North American time zone. So if you're doing business with people in, say, the US, that's pretty good. Very worth noting Of course, if you're doing business with people in Asia, or even arguably like Australia, Europe might be better in Thailand. But if you're dealing with people in North America, Thailand is a terrible time zone. It's just really, really bad. You're basically exactly the opposite of what they are. In terms of connectivity, I mean, if you want connections to the US, then Panama is great. If you're looking for connections to, places like Europe, Asia, etc., it's just much worse. Just, it's a long ways away. Obviously, you can get to Latin America. So for people who like Latin America, that would be something. Now, I will note that in my experience, most people who like Latin America prefer Colombia, they prefer Brazil, they prefer places like this, as opposed to Panama from an actual lifestyle standpoint, Mexico, etc. People don't tend to like living in Panama as much. And so maybe let's cycle over to that for a second. By the way, Thailand, super well connected by air. I mean, you can get to explore the Southeast Asian area really easily. Like I said, there's lots of great destinations to go to, lots of great tourism, etc. As well as, of course, if you want to go up to Japan, it's fairly accessible. If you want to go to, Hong Kong, if you want to go to the Middle East, even like flying to Europe, I mean, at least you've got some good airlines with some good connections, etc. So there's that. My guess is that the biggest thing that makes a difference for people is lifestyle. Obviously, you have differences in the language. Spanish in Panama and Thai in Thailand. Both places you can kind of debate, well, how easy is it to get by with English or whatever language you're dealing with. But one of my clients commented, who had lived there for a variety of years, he said, when you come into Southeast Asia, it's really easy to get set up with a lot of conveniences. It's just available at your fingertips. It's much more difficult to get integrated into Panama and kind of have all those conveniences, that experience at your fingertips. And certainly, Thailand has a lot more people. If you compare Panama City to Bangkok, for example, I mean, Bangkok is a much larger city. And there's just more accessibility due to those things. And so I would say that in terms of selection of food, in terms of selection of conveniences, in terms of selection of services available, et cetera, there's more of that in Thailand. Of course, traffic in Bangkok, very bad. You go walking on the streets, it's stinky. It's like a very weird thing because you have like the nicest places in the world, just like incredibly beautiful, and then you step out and it's just like totally different experience. And you kind of, anyway, that's, but there's a lot of culture, a lot of things there. People, I think, tend to enjoy the Thai culture, et cetera. But again, obviously, those are personal preferences from one person to another. I would say, though, that that's like a really big difference. Now, if people have kids, then obviously they care about quality of schooling and things like that. I can't say for sure, but the sense that I get is that there's maybe more international school options in Thailand versus Panama, and so you can consider that. Likewise, in terms of healthcare, I've used the hospitals in Thailand, and you have some like pretty good facilities there. There's some pretty good options, and so just more availability in that regard. Very reasonable prices, et cetera. Panama is notably not a very cheap place. It's actually quite expensive. And so that's probably a factor in people's analysis as well. You are in a bit of a situation where if you look at Thailand has become much more expensive over the last few years as become more popular with tourists. Certainly the cost of real estate in particular has gone up. I would say services not as much. People's wages, et cetera, are kind of more moderated. But I would say it's generally easier to live less expensive in Thailand versus Panama. And I would say that you can typically get a higher quality of life per dollar spent across the whole spectrum in Thailand versus Panama. So anyway, those are some factors that you might consider if you're going to look at either of them. I think that it's clearly a deeply personal choice, right? Some people prefer Latin culture, some people prefer Asian culture. This is, one is not better than the other. It's just different, right? And so, which do you prefer? Certainly, a lot of negotiating that gets done in Thailand. You've got that sort of everything is always being negotiated, and so it's just part of being there. You learn to deal with it, and you like it or you tolerate it or you hate it, depending on your preference. I think for people who have to do business in North America, I would probably prefer Panama. I think that's like kind of got a better alignment. If you don't need to do that, if you're able to do business abroad or your time zones don't matter, et cetera, then for me personally, I prefer Thailand. I think it's a nicer country in terms of just everything that it offers, or maybe nicer is not the right word. I think it just offers a lot more and is kind of more connected. I also kind of consider it's great to be connected to Asia these days. But that being said, like I said, it's very much up to personal preference. So let me know what you guys prefer. Put them in the comments below. Tell me some of the reasons why you prefer one country over the other. I'm super interested to hear. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you on the next video.